Deputy Defense Minister Ratib Bregwadze is said to be in charge of government administration. Previously, he was the head of the Department for Relations with Diaspora between 2017 and 2019, while in 2016, Deputy Executive Director of LEPL International Education Center. In 2011, he graduated from University of Hamburg, Faculty of Law, with an academic degree of Doctor of Law.
The head of the government administration, Kacha Kemoklidze, has resigned. In his final note on Facebook, Kemoklidze thanked former Prime Minister Giorgi Gakharia and wished the success to the new Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili with these words: "I would like to wish the new Prime Minister success in state affairs sincerely. Despite its different political tastes, religious beliefs, ethnicity, worldview, Georgia needs community consolidation because there are many difficult challenges ahead. The strength of this country is only in unity."
In total, there are 2 new faces in Irakli Garibashvili's cabinet of ministers. After 9 years, Maya Tzkitishvili, former Minister of Infrastructure and Regional Development of Georgia and first Vice Prime Minister, left politics and was replaced by Irakli Karsaladze, her first Deputy Minister, and the Juansher Burchuladze, former Deputy Minister of Defense, who now took the post of Defense Minister of Georgia.
Georgian government lifted part of coronavirus-related restrictions following the subsequent decision from the Interagency Coordination Council. As a result, mountain hotels have already resumed operating in line with the epidemiological regulations, but ropeways still remain closed until March 8. The Coordination Council also decided to resume intercity transport, but curfew still remains in place from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Here we are. This is the Checkpoints, hosted and co-authored by Elena Kvanchilashvili and myself. I'm Georgi Sakadze. It is Sunday, and we are ready to tell you more about business and economics.
10 p.m. sharp, and we are streaming from the Forbes studio. It was a tough week.
Indeed.
So we will start with the newest information, which comes from Geostat about the state of economic growth in Georgia during the pandemic, and the picture is not bright, to say the least. But I will let you decide on this, mentioning that estimated real gross domestic product declined by 11.5% in January 2021 year on year.
Construction, transportation and storage, manufacturing, accommodation and food service activities, arts, entertainment and recreation, real estate activities, electricity, gas, steam and air conditioning supply, wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles, all these sectors shrank. Growth was registered in information and communication, financial and insurance activities.
Economic growth also had a negative impact on exports, which fell by 16.2%. Overall, the turnover of VAT-paying enterprises in January was around 6 billion lari, which is 8.1% less compared to the previous year. The number of newly registered companies also decreased by 23% in January. Georgi, we have a very interesting infographic with very good music. It won't take long, and so let us see how the economy changed from 2003 to 2020. 6.1% annual decline in 2020 being the record high.
Yes, Elena, and I think this is a very logical opening of the program, because what we'll be talking about mostly today is in a tight touch with the picture that we have seen on the graphic video just a few minutes ago. Here is another video. The comments that followed the form of the arrest of the leader of the main opposition party, Nika Melia. And by the way, this is the main reason we have a renewed government and the new prime minister in this country today. Let's see the video on how the West reacted to Melia's arrest.
Georgi, to tell you the truth, it was quite shocking to see the US State Department's daily briefing opening up by mentioning the situation in Georgia and Nika Melia in person. We can listen to that soundbite right now.
Okay, good afternoon. We'll start things off today with Georgia. The United States is deeply troubled by the arrest of opposition leader Nika Melia and other members of the opposition in Georgia.
And then this brief was followed up with a question on what did the State Department mean about being troubled with the situation. And here is the answer that all of us got that day.
Just on the Georgia thing before I get to my main question, is there more to that comment that you're only that you're deeply troubled? Is there any?
Well, we covered this a little bit last week, so let me recap essentially what we said then. We are deeply concerned by political developments in Georgia. We again call on all parties to exercise restraint and to avoid any actions or rhetoric that could escalate tensions or result in violence. We urge the Georgian government to act in line with its Euro-Atlantic aspirations and to reinforce its commitment to the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law by ensuring that its judicial and prosecutorial systems are free of political bias. The United States supports a democratic, secure, and prosperous Georgia. We will continue to work with Georgia to promote the rule of law and accountable institutions.
The U.S. Embassy also issued a special statement with, to me, the most alarming message. Today, Georgia has moved backward on its path toward becoming a stronger democracy in the Euro-Atlantic family of nations, the statement said.
The United States Embassy is deeply concerned by the government's decision to detain the head of a major opposition political party at the party's headquarters this morning. We regret that the call of the United States and other international partners for restraint and dialogue was ignored. We are dismayed by the polarizing rhetoric from Georgia's leadership at a time of crisis. Force and aggression are not the solution to resolving Georgia's political differences. Today, Georgia has moved backwards on its path toward becoming a stronger democracy in the Euro-Atlantic family of nations.
The European Union also echoed the arrest of Nika Melia, calling on both parties to step up efforts to de-escalate and come together to find common ground.
Starting with those in power, we expect the government to provide inclusive leadership, putting the interests of the Georgian people first. A fair, independent, and accountable judiciary is also paramount. The European Union will remain very attentive to developments in this regard. It is crucial that the opposition plays a constructive role, including by joining the parliament, to further consolidate democracy and the rule of law in Georgia, and to help shape the country's reform path.
Yes, this is a short recap of the existing situation, which will be evolving, and we are here to give you more information on the timelines because Georgia has long chosen its Euro-Atlantic path and the values of this path.
Yes, Ellen, I also deeply believe in this. On the brighter side now is that despite the political crisis, some good things have still happened in this country, and one of them is definitely that we have more startups who have won.
Yes, Georgi, the Georgian Innovation and Technology Agency, GITA, has named 20 startups that have won the 100,000 lari co-funding grant program. Our readers on bm.g can find the detailed information about the winners, but the checkpoints talk to those from Silicon Valley who have coached the startups in Georgia to develop and then pitch their business ideas effectively. Our viewers can now meet USMAC CEO Alfredo Coppola and Women in Tech Program Director Amy Peck in what seemed to me a very inspirational and heartening conversation. Welcome to the Checkpoint, and thank you for taking our questions. I'm really happy to see you in the studio. Haven't seen like foreign visitors for such a long time. So how is your travel to Georgia due to all these restrictions and pandemic and everything?
Well, I think we've been actually very fortunate that we've been able to move around fairly well, and getting in was relatively easy. We spent the weekend in Kakheti, which was spectacular, and we got an unexpected snow. The lockdown is a challenge, but thankfully we're staying at a hotel where there's a cafe in the hotel. So it's been easy for us to sort of stay contained as a unit.
When we talk of a pandemic, I mean, is it a challenge or is it an opportunity for startups particularly, and also for women, and especially for women in tech?
Definitely the month of April in 2020 was a big shock for everybody because we had to adjust to and understand what this pandemic was all about. But I think certainly in Silicon Valley by September and the remainder of the year, we had bounced back. So investors were still investing in a different way. Corporations were still doing business with startups, but in a different way. And naturally, because nobody is traveling, we're doing all of our conferences and our programs online. And I think that is working quite well. But in your question about how startups had to adjust, obviously certain sectors were very negatively hit and some new opportunities emerged. Those in e-commerce and logistics, in the health and medical area. You know, there's different ways that the markets were impacted to the COVID.
Where do you think Georgia stands in that regard, comparing to other countries?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Georgia is in a greater disadvantage compared to other countries. And I would say, you know, the way the EU is behaving, in the way they're supporting their economies, I believe they're in a disadvantage. I believe Georgia is supported in different ways, and I think there's an opportunity for Georgian startups to take advantage of these unusual circumstances.
What do you mean under different ways?
Well, you know, to be really frank, I mean, a lot of the economical support comes from American sources, American donor agencies, and I think the way that they are dispersing funds is very different than the EU is dispersing funds.
You mean in terms of supporting what type of startups might be financed or granted the opportunity, right?
Exactly. I mean, we are very grateful to the partnership we have developed with the USAID Economic Security Program. They're funding the Georgian Women in Tech program that we are running. And I don't think this could have been funded as quickly if we were dealing with EU money, being very blunt.
Yeah, that's blunt and that's true. Also, Ms. Beck, what does the pandemic bring to women? We know that it's been a heavy burden on them, and every study, every research tells us that. But what about women, particularly in tech?
We had a panel last night with two women, one from Intuit and one from Unity, very high level. And because we're all working from home, and a lot of us are parents, it's been really interesting now for the family dynamic, whether it's, the father was doing most of the work with the children or the mother, but now they're able to sort of blend that workload. And I think, both sides have gotten to see what it is to really add the layer of taking care of your family. So I think moving forward, there's a real opportunity, and I think everyone has found really a new way to think about what's important to them in terms of lifestyle. And I think when you have a balanced lifestyle, you bring that to your work. And certainly for entrepreneurs, that will be the same.
What about particularly Georgian women in tech? Do you see potential here, and do you see this urge for them to have that type of skills of doing business?
Something that's really been interesting here that I've noticed is we've been coming here for about 2 years now, and this is the 4th program we've run. And the startups are typically very well balanced between men and women, which I think is a real credit to Jita in terms of the selection process. But they've gotten better and better and better. And so the other thing that's interesting is that there's not as much focus on whether it's a woman founder or a male founder. And interestingly, that's where we want to get to. We don't want to be having to talk about the gender conversation. We want to get to the point where it's perfectly normal to have either a female or a male CEO. And I think that that's where Georgia, because this ecosystem is young, that we're starting it with the right kind of ethos and ecosystem.
Since you mentioned that you're coming back for 2 years, almost 2 years now, what about the startups that you have coached before? Do you see them in business, or do you see them out of business? Because that's the specifics of startups.
So we've had a wonderful success story with a company called Fubber, who you may have heard.
Of course.
And they're just now moving into the Ukraine market. This is why we do this. And what's been interesting about this ecosystem building is that now they are mentors and they are an inspiration to other founders. And we were also very lucky last night. Normally, the awards of the matching grants happen after we have gone back to Silicon Valley, but we got to see, it's like we're watching our children, right? We got to see the winners last night, and there were a couple of them who we saw the last time around, and now their companies have been elevated. And in fact, a Georgian VC added 3 grants on top of the matching grants to 3 of the companies. So this is actually the next step, is not just bringing investors from outside of Georgia, but inspiring investment from within Georgia.
What about the uncertainty that the pandemic brings? Because investing in startups, and we know that grants are just the first phase for them, then they have to bring in the private capital. But what factor does this current uncertainty play for them?
In business, there are crises that come and go. And this one was a little bit different. But I think good entrepreneurs, they know how to thrive through the storm. And in a few months, they will figure out a different way of working. And that's what an entrepreneur is.
You mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that startups manage to adapt. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact that young startups faced was that they couldn't go to international conferences because those 3 or 4 day conferences were just the best way to meet lots of people in a short period of time. So we have seen some adaptations of some of the big name conferences like CES and TechCrunch Disrupt adapting to the virtual format. Some of them work well, some of them don't work so well, but we were also seeing new tools for networking that we have not seen before. So I think, good entrepreneurs have to figure out a way to adapt to any changing market condition. And in fact, in some ways, it's a little bit easier. I know on our side, typically we run about 10 to 12 accelerator programs every year. Last year was a record. We did 23.
Because of
Yeah,
because of no time, no place, nothing.
We didn't have to
restrictions,
travel.
right?
And it actually benefited the entrepreneurs a lot more because one of the important parts of our programs includes introductions to investors and introductions to corporations that could be customers. And it's a lot easier to reach these people now because they're not stuck in traffic, they're not on airplanes, they're just at the office. I mean, they're just in their homes. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you think some of that behavior will stay after pandemic ends?
I've already been to my very first, actually in December of last year, my first hybrid conference, and it was in Denver, Colorado, so it's relatively close to Silicon Valley. It was a short flight. There were about 150 people actually there, very, very high kind of, protection measures and way to measure, people's health. And then there were 2,500 that were participating virtually. And so I think we're going to start to see more of that. And it's really just a bit of experimentation right now, because it's not the way it was. And there is something to be said about meeting someone face to face and getting to interact with them at these events. So now it's a matter of finding that balance.
What are some of the tips or some of the tricks that you have for coaching?
One of the main things that we teach in our coaching, which we have done this past session and what we do every cycle, is to help entrepreneurs to be customer centric. So talk more about in the voice of the customer as opposed to the voice of their product. And this is something that typically is like Silicon Valley startups, they just kind of know it second nature. So we take it for granted. But it's not just Georgian startups that face this challenge, it's everywhere around the world. We work in more than 40 countries, and it's a very, very consistent problem.
I think it's also just giving them an end-to-end understanding of what it takes to scale a company, and that it's okay to know what you don't know. And that sounds, a little bit crazy at first when you say, well, how can I know what I don't know? But what we do is we show them, these are the elements that it's going to take to scale. It's okay if you're weak in this area. No one expects you to know everything. But make sure that if that's a blind spot for you, that we can help you find someone to help you with that particular piece of the business and scale.
So to recap your visit and yesterday's award ceremony at JITA, what are main results for you personally, and where do you see the potential for growth?
I think it was interesting to see that the winners were a really broad swath in terms of the types of companies that won. So that's very heartening. The other thing that's very interesting is that many of the companies recognize that this market in the Georgian region and in the Caucasus region in general is a big market. And so starting here and testing process and testing product and testing your customer service here in this arena is a really great way to build a company before kind of attacking the global market. But we didn't really see one sector over another in terms of balance. It really is all kinds of solutions.
I'd like to add that having done this over 4 cycles now, we are seeing a trend in terms of sectors. Heavy in e-commerce and also what we call environmental or sustainable solutions. And what's also interesting, again, from a Silicon Valley perspective, they were not groundbreaking technologies that we've never seen before, but they were groundbreaking for this region. And also they have done their homework. The startups have done their homework to say, let's figure it out in Georgia, and then we'll go to the neighboring countries where they also seem to be facing similar challenges. So I think that is a fabulous, new discovery for us, and I think investors are going to love that. That opportunity to invest in companies from Georgia that can scale within this region.
Thank you so much for this energetic and inspirational conversation. And my last point is how to put it, like on the side of the kind of like structural reforms for Georgia, because do you think the ecosystem without venture capitalists, without angel investors, without well-functioning capital markets is sustainable in the long long term when we are speaking about access to finance, to say the least?
Really important question, and this is why we're committed to establishing a presence here. In fact, we're opening an office in Georgia starting in March, and my co-founder is going to be moving here full time. What we see is an opportunity to bring all the stakeholders together, because startups by themselves, of course, they need investment, but the ecosystem is relatively young. And what is a healthy ecosystem? It's where all the stakeholders are working in harmony. So that includes universities, corporations, the investment community, governments, and also governments and professional services organizations all have to be working together. So I think that's what we see evolving over the next 3 or 4 years.
Wonderful. And we've seen Angel Investor Club in Georgia. It's been established, Georgia's Angel Investor Club. This is like the first big step towards this, to building this type of ecosystem.
I agree. I think it's Alfredo explained it, I think, very, very well. And I think also from the university level, we're starting to see them move from just traditional business, and they still teach traditional business, which is very important. But entrepreneurship is a very different type of business and mindset. And so we've seen all the universities here starting to add those types of programs to enable this type of thinking. The other thing that's really, really critical is to start to cross-pollinate the different groups within the university. So for example, computer science should be working with business. And even to a degree around education, because there's a lot of, within education that needs to happen. And entrepreneurship can start from middle school. And
Exactly.
We asked a question of the 2 women we were interviewing last night, are leaders born or are leaders made? And what we sort of found out was that both. So I would urge that it even move from the university system into grade school to start teaching this type of thinking and this entrepreneurial sort of business thinking in a very sort of lightweight way, but just so that opportunity is available to young people as they enter college and they start thinking about their careers.
Thank you so much for your interesting insights, and thank you for being with us and taking our questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Georgi, World Bank is actively involved in supporting JITA and the startups. And very briefly, let us listen to Sebastian Molenius from the World Bank. He had a very important focus on where the jobs come from, the real jobs come from. And once again, it's useful to think about such things, especially at times that the current pandemic naturally increases the tolerance towards a bigger state and its bigger involvement in the economy and business.
So the question then is, where do you create jobs? And jobs are not created in the public sector. Worldwide, about 10% of jobs are created in the public sector. 90% of all jobs are created in the private sector. So then you dig a little bit deeper and say, where in the private sector? And in fact, it's high growth firms, unsurprisingly, that create jobs. And it's not necessarily the large firms, medium firms, and small firms all together. It's high growth firms that are going to create new employment opportunities. And I think that it's all of you, again, collectively, that are creating new firms that will hopefully be dynamic, that will grow, and will continue to create those employment opportunities for the people here in Georgia.
Very good point, Elena, indeed. Earlier in your interview, Elena's interview, she briefly mentioned about Georgia's Angel Investors Club. And I will tell now our viewers and followers that our reporter, she's not junior reporter anymore.
No,
she's not.
reporter.
Yeah. Our reporter, Anna Tavadze, talked to Nelson Gray, acting angel investor, a recipient of Queen's Award for Enterprise Promotion, and who has advice to share for those in Georgia who are taking first steps to expand this practice in the country and to contribute to what Mr. Molenius was stressing just a few minutes ago in the checkpoints.
Thank you for finding the time. The Checkpoints is happy to host you. So, Mr. Gray, you've been a business angel investor for over 20 years, and you're recognized internationally as a thought leader and a public speaker. So we want to know, how and when did you start, and why did you decide to get into this field?
I think suggesting that I made a positive decision to get involved in this field is overstating it. I kind of accidentally drifted into this. I was fortunate to be able to sell some businesses back in 1993, 94, and found myself at the age of about 35, 36 with nothing to do but a reasonable financial position. And looking around for other things to do, I came across this idea of becoming involved in other people's businesses and funding them. I'm not even sure we called it business angel activity then. But it looked pretty interesting because I got to engage with some really interesting people doing stuff that was probably impossible, but that's why they were, so successful later on. And I just gradually got a buzz out of doing it. And it's been almost an accidental journey from doing my first investment through to running an angel investment group, to running a fund, to being able to travel internationally to exciting places like Georgia. We can talk about the financial returns, and they obviously can be nice, but they take a while. But I think the real highlights come from making a difference. And I use a couple of examples of companies for that. The first is the second company I ever invested in, a company called Optos, which uses a laser to take pictures of the back of people's eyes. And we literally created something that saves people's lives and saves people's sight. And we used to get letters in from people saying, because of your technology, which is brand new, you have saved the life of my child, or you've saved the sight of my granny, or whatever it is. And that's a hugely powerful thing to be able to be involved in. On the other hand, something relatively industrial or ordinary seeming would be a company called Oregon Timber. Now, it makes timber frame house kits for large construction companies in the UK. And a few years ago, my wife and I went down to the site where they're opening up their second big construction factory. And there were nearly 200 people on site. And that's the biggest employer in that region of Scotland. I think it's the second. I think Tesco's supermarket's the biggest. But we had created something that employed directly about 200 people and supported the local economy tremendously well. And that was a really kind of powerful feeling as well, that you created something that was affecting so many people's lives in a very positive way.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned Georgia, and I know that you've been here and you're interested in Georgia and you've observed the scene for a while. So may I ask you, what opportunities do you see in Georgia in terms of investment opportunities? And what are your general impressions about business doing in Georgia?
Well, I have to be careful because I have managed to visit Georgia twice before the lockdown. And so it would be presumptuous of me to, to make significant statements. So I can only give you a few personal impressions. But it's a delightful place to visit. Is first off, it's friendly. It seems open. The people are happy to talk. So that's all. I find that all very positive, and I find the people I talk to very positive, which is good. They're looking positively at how to move forward, how to do things, how to engage internationally. And I think those are the fundamental foundations for building something which could be quite special. I do think it's relatively early days, obviously, in this particularly early stage angel investing scene, but all the bits are there. And what I'm hoping to do is encourage those the components to come together and be significant.
Thank you. Well, Georgia does have a promising startup scene with many bright minds trying to solve many issues and come up with effective solutions. So what insights from your experience would you share with them? Any tips or advice about the absolute musts that they should incorporate in their decision making?
Well, we could talk about how to build a business for a very long time, but I think we should focus perhaps on my key area, which is the kind of raising the funding and the investment. So let's have a look at that. But even before that, I do say to founders, entrepreneurs, want to be entrepreneurs, that this will absorb your life, and don't treat it as a hobby. And I'd say the only people who should become founders and entrepreneurs are those people who can't sleep at night because they're not founders and entrepreneurs. It really has to be a passion that you're driven for, because it will take your life for many years. And I would also urge people to take the journey with their family as well, because this is going to impact on your wider social circumstances. It will affect your immediate family. So take them on the journey with you and make sure they also wish to be committed to it. Secondly, really look at why you want to do this, because I think some founders end up being disappointed in the results of seeking funding because they haven't thought through the implications. So people start businesses for very many reasons. You know, I want to work for myself. I want to have more time with my family, whatever it happens to be. If you go down the equity investment route, there are certain baggages that you take with you. One, you are sharing ownership of your business with somebody else. And secondly, it is an investment. So the investor's looking for a return, and that return is usually the sale of the business, either to a larger corporation or to an IPO. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have a business partner, if you don't want to build something which will eventually be sold or exited by IPO, again, perfectly reasonable, but don't go down this route. So I'd ask you to do that homework and that really deep looking into your personal motivations before you start.
Thank you. After what I imagine was dozens of deals and global experience, what advice would you give to investors specifically? Maybe perhaps with a special emphasis on Georgia.
It is fair to say that every country I visit is concerned that somehow they are different, and they're often concerned that somehow they are not as advanced or not as developed as other countries. And I can assure you that that is not the case. That I'm actually doing some work just now in a part of England to try and develop angel activity, and it isn't particularly more developed than it is in Georgia right now. So just don't underplay your position, and don't think that somehow because you're at the beginning of a journey here, you're anyway lesser than anywhere else. So first of all, have that confidence and realization that there is a global angel community, that you are becoming part of that global investment community, and you can reach out to it, and that it is generally a very friendly and welcoming community, and people will be there to help you and guide you and help you not make the mistakes that we've made along the way. So I think, first of all, don't put yourselves down in any way. Secondly, I think for new investors coming to this, it is appropriate to realize there's actually quite a lot to learn. Even the most experienced business people, and certainly I myself, my first angel investment was a total and utter disaster. There was nothing right about it at all. But having built and sold a business for fairly reasonable money, I thought I was the master of the universe, and angel investing found me out fairly quickly. So do it with others and do a little bit of research, and don't commit too much to one deal to start with. I think a number of business people think that they should do it themselves. They put a large amount of their own money into one or two companies. And frankly, that's not what you should be doing. Everywhere I go, it is come together in groups, come together in syndicates, share the work, share the deals, spread the risk. I think motivation is critical. Frankly, if all you're interested in doing is making money, then this is probably not for you yet. This is about making a difference and making a better future for a country, for your children, for whatever. And the financial return can take a long time to come. But the social return, if you like, the enjoyment, the feedback of actually creating something new and exciting and making a difference to the world, that's what feeds the angel investors for the first few years, and that's what you really want to connect to.
The Angel Investors Club has been established in Georgia. What are your expectations in terms of their impact? And can you elaborate more, because you spoke so wonderfully about the social reward that you get from this job. So what are your expectations in this regard? And maybe any particular advice to the founders of the club, because I know that you are in touch with them.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I think that the establishment of an angel club or an angel group, as might also be referred to, is critically important, not just for at the founders level or the investors level, but frankly at a Georgian national level. If you look at both the data and personal experience, angels that are organized into a club or a group invest more money and invest more successfully than one-off single angels all over the place. And I can see that impact, particularly over the last 12 months with COVID, where countries where angels are organized into clubs have generally not seen any reduction in the level of investment that's been going on. In countries where angel investing is not organized, you've seen quite a dramatic fall down. So this is significantly important at a national level to create something which is robust, that gives access to many people to become angel investors and put money into new companies and build a real community. And it gives us an opportunity to help those investors do it more effectively and more efficiently and frankly better. So good investments make better companies and better survival rates. And we can educate them that, you know, at one level, an angel investor does not take 55% of the ownership of a company. This is a minority game. So we have to educate people. Mm-hmm. So I have great hopes that this is the beginning, and we will be able to take steps forward and create different syndicates of interest in the country. Groups or clubs work best when they're made up of people who have a common investment philosophy and understand and trust each other. And I think that's the first principle, is building trust amongst the investors and having a common philosophy. Because, you know, if you have somebody in the group who wants to exit a company in 6 months and others are content to do it properly and wait a few years, that you need like-mindedness there. And I think you need to have a realistic understanding of how long it's going to take and provide that education, and then follow that common theme through, building what I call entrepreneurial wealth. I don't propose to maximize shareholder return or investor return. My philosophy is to build entrepreneurial wealth. If we make the founders and the company big and large, then we will also get our share back. But it's a different way of looking at things. It's not about maximizing shareholder value in the short term. And I would encourage that. And I would encourage sharing. I believe that, frankly, I don't know anybody in the world who can pick winners in this game. We all make our first investments, and we all try to do our best. And every investment we make, we think is going to be a winner. But the reality is, I don't know. So I would much rather share my deals with other people to bring them in, so we've got a wide shareholder base to support the company in the long term. And I think that sharing attitude is very important to making this work.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Gray.
One thing is for sure, Georgi, the economy must open up, and must open up with confidence in order for these and all the other companies to do what they usually do, business. Although numbers for the pandemic have shrunk recently, as of Friday, the regional COVID statistics show that by the number of new cases, Georgia is still leading in the South Caucasus, meaning Armenia and Azerbaijan as well. For example, Azerbaijan had 126 new cases, Armenia had 282, new cases. Well, Georgia had, on the same day, Friday, 363 new cases. The same is true for the death toll in 24 hours here. Georgia, on average, 3 times more deaths from COVID than in Armenia or Azerbaijan. The numbers are much higher for the other bigger countries in the region, like Russia, Turkey, or Ukraine, of course. What effect will the opening up of the economy have on these numbers when Georgia already knows that it is not able to receive Pfizer vaccine as provisioned by the government earlier, and the status of AstraZeneca vaccine is also getting dimmer, are yet to be seen.
Quite an ambitious picture there, Elena. But today I would like to focus our attention on a different type of pandemic. That is the smoking pandemic. With a representative of Philip Morris, Georgia, we touched upon some very important topics for health and for the smoke-free future we would all like to see and live in. Here are some insights from Yuri Gordak, General Manager Caucasia and Moldova at Philip Morris International. Yuri, thank you so much for being finally at the Forbes office while being on the cover. Thank you so much for your time. Glad to host you here. So we hear almost daily about the smoking pandemic, and many people believe that companies like you are blamed for it. So my intro question, if we may consider so, is quite simple. When your company will stop selling cigarettes?
Wow. Thank you for the invitation, having the opportunity to talk on this difficult topic. Yes, you're right. Often I got this question. I'm asked on this. Mm-hmm. But if we stop selling cigarettes and people continue smoking, legal product will be replaced by illicit immediately. I would ask a different question. When will consumers stop buying cigarettes? Today, consumer demand on cigarettes remains. And there are more than 1 billion smokers around the globe. And based on World Health Organization information, around 1 billion smokers will be in 2025.
And then how do you see the solution for this billion, as you have mentioned, adult smokers?
As you know, the best way for smokers is quit smoking, actually tobacco product and nicotine altogether, but many don't. And these people around us, our friends, colleagues, even in our family members, but they need to have alternative. That's why at Philip Morris, we committed to a smoke-free future, a future where cigarette does not exist. And we would like to proceed as soon as possible on this journey.
How big is the problem in Georgia? Can we talk about some details about Georgia?
Let's have a look at figures.
Okay.
There are approximately 800,000 adult smokers in Georgia. These thousands of Georgians are around us, and they're just not just the numbers. I meet these people every day on the streets and ask them, why do you do not quit smoking? Why you continue smoking? I think so these people need to have access to the information about alternatives, and we need to understand cause of smoking.
Did I get you correctly that you are talking about some active awareness campaigns within and coming from tobacco company itself and within the adult smokers?
Still, a lot of people believe that nicotine is the main cause and main problem, but it's not. Nicotine is addictive, but the main problem is combustion. Main problem is combustion, which main cause of diseases. The problem of combustion is generation of smoke. If you can eliminate combustion, actually you can significantly reduce level of harmful chemicals which cigarettes generate. Yes, our industry has an unreliable problem with credibility in the past. But it's our belief that history should not be used to neglect 800,000 smokers in Georgia.
Yeah.
And those who would otherwise continue to smoke should have an access to science-based information to make more informed decisions.
Oh, okay. My next question is that it's almost 6 months since Georgia has joined smoke-free world, let me say so. Tell us about this journey, Yuri, and at the same time, how did the Georgian consumers accept the product?
I lived in Tbilisi almost 2 years in Georgia. And even before the launch of IQOS in the country, I could see people who took a decision and switched to alternatives. And people actually took their own decision to select product alternatives to smoking. I'm very happy that now we can support legal age IQOS users with full customer service here. I'm glad to share with you that currently thousands of Georgian adult smokers switched from smoking cigarettes to better alternative. On my part, at Philip Morris Georgia, we are very happy that we have launched our smoke-free journey in Georgia, which will support transition of adult smokers in the country. And we are talking about 800,000 people here.
As you have mentioned, thousands of adult Georgians have already chosen smoke-free alternatives. However, according to the latest statistics from NCDC, I'm so happy that I'm quoting NCDC, not about COVID. That's worth to mention. As you have highlighted, there is still around 800,000 smokers in Georgia. What steps should be taken by authorities and regulator for tobacco harm reduction?
I think significant steps have been already taken by NCDC and authorities in regulation of tobacco industry and tobacco product. And we strongly believe that regulation should continue to encourage people to quit smoking, or even better, do not start smoking. However, for those adults who would otherwise continue smoking, regulation should provide access to scientifically based, scientifically substantiated information about alternatives to smoking. And this is the direction which I believe should be taken.
Are you saying that there should be some sort of differential regulation, right?
It should be risk proportionate, at common sense regulation. Actually, it exists in Georgia, but exists in different industries. As an example, you have electric cars, and we have differentiated regulation versus benzene cars. We have alcohol, where regulation is based on level of alcohol in the product. We have energy sector, oil, gas, renewable energy. It's not something new. It's already exists. I think so Georgia can take best examples from European Union countries where this regulation actually support development of society.
Further resume how Philip Morris Georgia sees smoke-free journey in Georgia.
We have started officially smoke-free journey in Georgia just 8 months ago. And I'm very happy that Georgians are making terrific progress on this journey. Can you imagine? By the end of 2020, 25,000 legal age smokers switched to alternatives. They took a decision based on science, based on the product available in the country, and switched to smoke-free alternatives and stopped smoking. This is an outstanding result and just the beginning of the journey. And I have to underline,
please,
that we cannot do it alone. It needs to be supported. It's really difficult to have a massive change without support. We have launched our smoke-free journey in Georgia, hoping that Georgia will follow the track European countries by establishing taxation and regulation that support switching from cigarettes to scientifically based alternatives, and hope it will be developed in the country. Georgian government and public authorities have a critical role to play towards tobacco harm reduction by providing clear and not misleading information to the society and creating a framework of regulation which actually supports shift of these smokers, adult smokers, either quit to smoking or people who would otherwise continue smoking switch to alternatives.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And since we're talking about healthy life surrounded by Georgia's leading entrepreneurs and America's leading billionaires everywhere in this studio, let's talk a bit about the clean and renewable energy and the biggest fortunes that, according to Bloomberg today, are green.
Yeah. More so that we even have a video, and all credits and our thanks, special thanks to Bloomberg, that we will be leaving you off and see you for next Sunday.
10 p.m. sharp, it is Georgi.
See you soon.
As the planet's climate crisis accelerates, the fastest growing fortunes in the world are now green, thanks to a new generation of tycoons amassing wealth in the clean energy boom. The 10 billionaires on Bloomberg Green's new ranking showcase the explosive growth of electric vehicles, batteries, and solar power. Although not every dollar in these fortunes is derived from climate-aligned businesses whose core products reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there's no dispute that the transformation heralded by these billionaires is well underway. Elon Musk, Tesla's chief executive officer, became the richest person on the planet earlier this year thanks to the company's surging stock price. Its Gigafactory 1 is the world's highest volume battery plant. CATL, the world's biggest maker of EV batteries, supplies car manufacturers, including Tesla, Toyota, BMW, and Volvo. Its lithium iron phosphate batteries were cheap enough to let Tesla trim the price of its Model 3 by almost 10% last year. LONGTI is the world's largest manufacturer of solar wafers. Established in 2000, the company supplies about a quarter of the world's solar wafers and modules. Wang Chuanfu set up BYD in 1995, and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has owned a stake in the carmaker since 2008. The company is converting the city of Shenzhen's buses, taxis, and trucks to plug-in vehicles. Eve Energy is the fifth largest supplier to China's EV sector, with 5% market share, and counts Daimler, BMW, and Xiaopeng among its customers. It recently produced lithium-ion samples for an EV battery that can be charged in just 5 minutes. Founded by ex-Alibaba executive He Xiaopeng in 2014, Xiaopeng makes an EV sedan and SUV. The automaker provides free charging services at 670 stations across 100 Chinese cities. Pratt owns Georgia-based Pratt Industries, the world's largest privately held 100% recycled paper and packaging company. The company also runs clean energy plants to help power its mills. Backed by Chinese tech giant Tencent, NIO has surged eightfold in value since its initial public offering in September 2018. The EV maker plans to build a network of 500 power swap stations where people can change their car's battery rather than recharge it by the end of 2021. Wobbin developed his first wind turbine in the 1970s and set up Enercon in 1984. Although one of the world's largest companies in the sector, it has faced challenges in its home country, where delayed approvals for new wind farms damped sales. It appointed a new CEO in November to engineer a turnaround. Established in 2003, First Applied Material mainly produces films for solar panels. It makes more than half the world's ethylene vinyl acetate films, an essential component of solar panels that helps protect them from harsh weather.